every single one of these issues for decades, I see this as a make or break moment. If you care about the fairness of elections, the future of unions, racial disparities in universities, the rights of women, or the future of our planet, you should care about who wins the presidency and appoints the next Supreme Court justices. And consider, if you will, consider the dangerous turn the court has taken in recent years toward protecting the rights of corporations over those of people. Now, you may have heard of the case Citizens United. The court ruled that corporations have an unfettered right to free speech, just like you and me. That means no limit on what corporations can spend independently to influence elections. And, big surprise, a flood of money from rich people, corporations, special interests has poured into our politics. Citizens United opened the door to the creation of super PACs, and between 2008 and 2012 presidential elections, spending by outside groups tripled. In 2014, the top 100 donors to super PACs spent nearly as much as all 4,750,000 small donors in the country combined. Now, the idea, I believe, that money is speech turns our Constitution upside down. Wealth should not be privileged in the courts. In fact, it should have no privilege. Yet at a time when inequality between working Americans and those at the top is starker than ever, the Supreme Court has given the wealthiest Americans even greater power to affect what happens in our democracy. Justice Ginsburg says if there were one recent decision she'd overrule, it's this one. I'm with her, and I hope she gets the chance to do just that. Now, people forget this, but the Citizens United case actually began with yet another right-wing attack on me. It grew out of a Wisconsin case about whether corporations can run issue ads, so-called issue ads, close to an election. So we all have a personal stake in this. If the court doesn't overturn Citizens United, I will fight for a constitutional amendment to limit the influence of money in elections. It is dangerous to our country and poisonous to our politics. But it doesn't stop with Citizens United. This court has voted on the side of corporations against the interests of workers, unions, consumers, and the general public in case after case. It's made it harder for consumers to band together to sue a corporation, even if they are collectively suffering from corporate behavior. So 2 million Comcast subscribers in Philadelphia were told they each had to hire a lawyer if they wanted to sue for fairer prices. 1.5 million women working at Walmart each had to hire a lawyer if they wanted to sue for sex discrimination. That's a burden that the vast majority of people cannot afford. I know this may sound a little technical, but it points to an alarming trend. The court used to, in the 20th century anyway, protect the little guy against the rich and powerful. More and more, it's doing the opposite, protecting the rich and powerful against the little guy. One study found that between 2009 and 2012, the one party most likely to convince the court to hear a case out of all the top petitioners from every part of our society and economy was the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So the court was more likely to take up cases concerning corporate interests and then to decide in favor of those corporate interests. If I'm fortunate enough to be president, I will appoint justices who will make sure the scales of justice are not tipped away from individuals toward corporations and special interests, who will protect the constitutional principles of liberty and equality for all, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or political viewpoint, who will protect a woman's right to choose rather than billionaires' rights to buy elections, and who will see the Constitution as a blueprint for progress, not a barrier to it. So I hope you and everyone across Wisconsin and everyone across America keeps the court in mind when you vote. Now, some of you may already have decided to support me. Some of you may have decided differently. I will keep working to earn your vote. But even if you are decided or undecided, I will be for you, but I ask you this: please make sure the court factors into your decision. Conservatives know exactly how high the stakes are. For years, they have used aggressive legal strategies to accomplish through the courts what they failed to accomplish through legislation. They couldn't pass a repeal of the Affordable Care Act, so they tried to get the courts to do it. They couldn't stop the president's Clean Power Plan, and they couldn't pass immigration reform, and they didn't want the president to act. So they got the courts to step in. Now they are fighting hard to make sure the Supreme Court includes as many right-wing justices as possible. As scary as it might be, ask yourselves, what kind of justice would a President Trump appoint? Or for that matter, what kind of attorney general? What kind of lower court judges? As you know, he believes Muslims should be banned from entering this country because of their faith. What would that mean for a nation founded on religious freedom? He wants to round up 11 million immigrants and kick them out. What would that mean for a nation built by immigrants? He says wages for working people are too high and we shouldn't raise the minimum wage. What would that mean for working people and a court that's already tilting in favor of powerful corporations? Let's be clear about what's really going on here. The current fight over Judge Garland is just the latest in a long line of actions aimed at disrupting our government and undermining our president. And the result is an America that's more divided, more dysfunctional, and less secure. Consider how Republicans, led by Ted Cruz, shut down the entire federal government in 2013 rather than fund the Affordable Care Act, or how they almost shut down the government again last fall over trying to defund Planned Parenthood. Remember what Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, said back in 2010, that the single most important priority for Republicans was making Barack Obama a one-term president. Now, some people thought that was hyperbole, but I always remember Maya Angelou's advice. When someone shows you who they are, believe them, right? And today, Republican leaders have been showing us who they are, in fact, for a long time. Blocking Judge Garland is just the latest evidence, and we should start believing them. If you want to know where that kind of obstruction and recklessness leads, just look at the Republican race for the presidency. Now, every day, another Republican bemoans the rise of Donald Trump. They say a Trump nomination will set their party back decades. I agree. It will set the Republican Party back if Donald Trump is their standard bearer. But Donald Trump didn't come out of nowhere. What the Republicans have sown with their extremist tactics, they are now reaping with Donald Trump's candidacy. It wasn't long after Senator McConnell said his number one goal was to prevent the president's reelection that Donald Trump started his racist campaign to discredit the president's citizenship. Remember the birther movement? And Ted Cruz embarked on his strategy of holding the government hostage to get his way. These things are connected. When you have leaders willing to bring the whole of government to a halt, to make headlines, you may just give rise to candidates who promise to do even more radical and dangerous things. Because once you make the extreme normal, you open the door to even worse. And when you have a party dead set on demonizing the president, you may just end up with a candidate who says the president never legally was the president at all. Enough is enough. It is time for us to take a stand, and you could start right here in Wisconsin. Your Senator, Ron Johnson, is bragging about blocking the president. He's in a tight race against former Senator Russ Feingold, an exceptional public servant. During his time on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Senator Feingold actually helped build a stronger judiciary. So when you leave here, I urge you to call the office of Senator Johnson, email him, contact him. If he has a Facebook page, go on and express your opinion. Tell him to stop playing games with the Supreme Court. And remember this in November when you choose who stands for you in the Senate. The incumbent will vote for corporations and against working people. His opponent will vote for a court that will listen to you. Then keep these larger issues in mind when you go to the polls on April 5th. It's time to get back to what makes America already great. Respect for the rule of law, statesmanship over showmanship, and people working together across party lines for the good of the nation. That's what this court fight is really about. That's what this election is about. Whether we as a country are able to come together to meet the challenges we face and break down all the barriers holding people back, or whether we will be paralyzed by deadlock and divided from each other by bitter partisanship. At our best, America has united behind the ideal that everyone deserves a fair shot, no matter who we are or where we started out. And at its best, the Supreme Court has defended that ideal. Like in 1954, when the court abolished segregation in our schools, or 1973, when it ruled that women have the right to make intimate health decisions for ourselves, or 1977, when the court paved the way for public sector unions, or 1982, when it ruled that undocumented children had the right to go to school, or just last year, when the court ruled that marriage equality was the law of the land. You know, all Jim Obergefell wanted was to marry his partner of more than 20 years, John Arthur, before John Arthur died of ALS. They ended up flying to Maryland because their home state of Ohio didn't recognize same-sex marriage. John was so sick he couldn't even leave the plane, but they got married right there on the tarmac in Baltimore, then flew straight home. And when John died 3 months later, Ohio listed him as single on his death certificate. For the partner who had loved and cared for him, this was a bitter, painful blow, a rejection of the life they had built together over decades. Until the Supreme Court ruled that Jim and John's marriage was legal everywhere in the United States of America. And in that decision, Justice Kennedy wrote, The nature of injustice is that we may not always see it in our own times. The generations that wrote and ratified the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment did not presume to know the extent of freedom in all its dimensions. So they entrusted to future generations a charge, protecting the right of all persons to enjoy liberty as we learn its meaning. That decision is the latest reminder of what the court can do when it stands for equality or against it, when it makes America a fairer place or rolls back the progress we've worked so hard to achieve. It depends on what the court decides, and it depends on who's deciding, which in the end means it depends on all of us. So think hard about the court. For years, people have tried to make the Supreme Court a voting issue, and it's not easy to do. People are rightly concerned about their economic well-being, about the education of their children, about their health care, about their Social Security payment, about all the other issues that keep people up at night around millions of kitchen tables. But this election has ripped away the curtain and made it absolutely clear to everyone how essential the Supreme Court is to those decisions as well. I will keep talking about it and advocating and calling on the Senate to do its job. And I hope there will be a great chorus of voices across our land that will do the same. It's our Constitution, it's our court, and it's our future. Thank you all very much.